Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
That day, I decided to hit up Walmart since it's only a 5-minute drive from the office. Their hot bar food isn't gourmet by any means, but it's cheap, filling, and fast. Usually. The problem with that Walmart is they never seem to have enough people working. I've gotten used to waiting around for someone to show up behind the counter. I grew up in a family where my parents both worked multiple jobs just to keep us afloat. My mom would pack my lunch every single day because we couldn't afford for me to buy food at school. She taught me to be respectful of other people's time and to always wait my turn. Maybe that's why what happened next bothered me so much. I walked up to the hot bar around 12 p.m. and predictably, no one was there. The food was sitting under the heat lamps looking decent enough. I checked my phone and figured I had plenty of time even if I had to wait a few minutes. I stood there looking at the options, trying to decide between the fried chicken and some kind of pasta dish. After about 2 minutes of waiting, I heard this commotion coming from the grocery aisles. 3 kids came running over, probably between ages 5 and 8, yelling and pointing at the food display. They pressed their faces right up against the glass, leaving smudges everywhere while making excited comments about all the chicken they could see and asking if they could get some. Their mother finally appeared from around the produce section. She was walking slowly, completely absorbed in a loud phone conversation. I could hear her from 20 feet away talking about some drama with her sister or friend. She positioned herself right next to me, close enough that I could smell her perfume and hear every word of her conversation. She told whoever was on the phone that she had already explained something to someone who never listens, then said she needed to hold on while she got food for the kids first. She didn't acknowledge me at all, just stood there like I was invisible while continuing her phone call. Her kids were still making noise and touching the glass display. I kept checking my watch, hoping the employee would show up soon. Finally, after about 6 minutes total, a young woman in a Walmart vest came walking over from the back area. She looked tired and a bit frazzled, probably dealing with 10 other things at once. She looked between the woman and me, clearly trying to figure out who was first. The employee asked how she could help us. I opened my mouth to start ordering when the woman suddenly spoke up, still holding her phone. She ordered 3 kids' meals with chicken for her children, said she wanted the pasta for herself, and also asked for some of those potato wedges. I had been standing there for 6 minutes while she wandered around talking on her phone, and now she was just cutting in front of me like I didn't exist. I told her no, that I was here first and I was in a rush. Her face went completely blank like someone had just told her the sky was green. She blinked a few times and stammered something I couldn't make out. I didn't wait around to hear whatever excuse she was going to come up with. I quickly told the employee I wanted the fried chicken plate with mashed potatoes and green beans. The employee quickly got my order together while the woman just stood there staring. I paid, grabbed my container, and headed for the exit. I could feel her watching me the entire time, probably shocked that someone had actually called her out. When I was walking to my car, I heard her voice getting louder behind me, now complaining to whoever was on the phone about how rude people were these days. Her kids were still running around making noise while she acted like she was the victim in the situation. She was telling the person on the phone that she couldn't believe what had just happened, saying some guy had completely cut in front of her and that people have no manners anymore. I sat in my car for a moment before driving back to work. Normally, I avoid confrontation at all costs. I'm the guy who apologizes when someone else bumps into me, but something about her attitude just rubbed me wrong. She had all the time in the world to leisurely stroll through Walmart while talking on her phone, then expected to jump ahead of someone who'd been waiting patiently. We're not just background characters in her personal movie. I've been living in this small town my whole life. Finding work when you're 17 and don't have a car is basically impossible. The closest job opportunities are miles away, and public transportation here is a joke. My mom is 37 and works part-time at a local diner, but the pay is terrible. We've been struggling financially for as long as I can remember. My brother is 19 and managed to get a job at a warehouse about 20 minutes away. He gets to use mom's old beat-up Honda to get there, which honestly makes me jealous sometimes. Not because I want the car, but because at least he has options. He makes decent money for someone his age, but he's also saving up to move out. We've been on SNAP benefits for the past few years, which helped us get by. It wasn't much, but it covered the basics. My mom would stretch those benefits as far as possible, buying generic brands and hunting for sales. Things were tight, but we managed. Then last month, everything changed. The government shut down our SNAP benefits due to some bureaucratic mess that mom couldn't figure out. She tried calling the office multiple times, but you know how that goes. Long hold times, getting transferred around, and no real answers. That's when mom approached my brother about helping with groceries. She asked him for $100 to buy food for the family. I was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework when this conversation happened. Mom told my brother she needed him to help out with groceries and asked if he could give her $100. My brother immediately refused, saying he couldn't do that because he was saving up for his own place. Mom explained that we didn't have food assistance right now and that we needed to eat. But my brother just shrugged and said that wasn't his problem, claiming he already paid for his own food. Mom pointed out that he lived here rent-free and used her car, but my brother argued back that he put gas in it and helped with maintenance, so they were even. I watched this back and forth for a few minutes, getting more frustrated by the second. My brother makes decent money and could easily spare $100, but he's always been selfish like this. Mom enables it too, which makes it worse. The next day, Mom dropped the bomb on me. I was getting ready for school when she announced her new plan. Mom told me she was done buying food for this family because we were all grown now and everyone needed to buy their own groceries. I asked her what she meant by everyone being grown since I was 17 and didn't have a job. She just told me to figure it out and that she wasn't responsible for feeding me anymore. I explained how I was supposed to figure it out when I couldn't even get a job without a car and she wouldn't let me use hers. She coldly replied that it wasn't her problem. That's when I completely lost it. All the frustration from watching her baby my brother while expecting me to be independent just exploded. I asked her why she even had kids in the first place, especially if she was poor and just ended up regretting them. When she asked me what I meant, I told her she always talked about how we ruined her life. I said she had me when she was 20 and broke and now she was mad about it, but she should have thought about that before having kids she couldn't afford. She told me not to dare talk to her like that, but I kept going. I said if she really wanted to punish someone, she should punish my brother since he was the one who refused to help when she asked. He had money and a job, but somehow I was the one who had to figure out how to buy groceries. She said I was being disrespectful. Then I really crossed the line. I told her that if she really didn't want us, she should have just aborted us or never had us in the first place. At least then she wouldn't have to complain about how we ruined her life every single day. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's face went completely red, and I could see the hurt in her eyes mixed with anger. She quietly said that maybe she should have. Maybe she should have made different choices. When I asked her why she didn't, she repeated twice that we were grown and that she had already raised us, so she didn't owe us anything anymore. The way she said it twice, like she was trying to convince herself, made me realize how stressed and overwhelmed she really was. But I was too angry and hurt to care in that moment. I told her that was fine, but not to expect me to take care of her when she was old and couldn't work anymore. I stormed off to school that day feeling terrible but also justified. The whole situation was unfair, and I was tired of being the one who always had to understand and be mature. For the next week, things were incredibly tense at home. Mom stuck to her word and stopped buying groceries for anyone but herself. My brother didn't seem to care much, since he was already buying his own food anyway. I started asking friends if I could eat lunch with them and began researching food banks in our area. During my research, I found several local food banks that could help families in our situation. I also discovered that we might be eligible for emergency food assistance while our SNAP case was being reviewed. I printed out all the information and left it on the kitchen counter. A few days later, Mom approached me while I was doing homework She asked if we could talk, and I agreed. Mom told me she had seen the information I left about the food banks and that she had called a few of them that day. When I asked what happened, she explained that they were going to help us out with some groceries that week. She also mentioned that she had called the SNAP office again and they were reviewing our case. I said that was good news. Then Mom apologized for what she had said the other day. She admitted she was stressed and overwhelmed and had taken it out on me. She said she didn't mean it when she said she should have made different choices. I apologized too and admitted I had said some really hurtful things. But Mom surprised me by saying I was right about some of it and that she did complain too much about her life choices, which wasn't fair to us kids. I told her about how I had spoken to the food bank about our situation and that they said they could help us regularly until we got back on our feet. Mom thanked me for researching all of this and said she should have done it herself instead of just giving up. We hugged it out, and while things aren't perfect, at least we're talking again. My brother still hasn't offered to help with groceries, but Mom seems to be seeing his selfishness more clearly now. I dropped out of college when my dad got sick and we couldn't afford the tuition anymore, so I got a job at the grocery store. I'm usually in charge of restocking the refrigerated sections, which means I spend most of my shifts bent over freezers and coolers, trying to organize products and make sure everything looks neat for customers. That day, I clocked in at 7 in the morning and got my assignment list from my supervisor. The dairy section needed a complete restock after the weekend rush, and I had about 50 cases of milk, yogurt, and cheese to organize. I grabbed my cart and wheeled it over to the refrigerated aisle ready to get to work. The store was pretty quiet that early in the morning. We mostly got the regular customers who liked to shop before the crowd showed up. I was focused on my task, crouched down next to the yogurt section, trying to fit the new shipment into the already cramped space. The way our store is laid out, the aisles are pretty narrow, especially near the refrigerated sections where the cases stick out a bit. I had been working for about an hour when this woman appeared in my peripheral vision. She was wearing a fancy tracksuit and had her hair done up in one of those complicated styles that probably cost more than I make in a day. She was pushing her cart really aggressively, like she owned the entire store. I could hear her talking loudly on her phone about some spa appointment she had later. I was trying to reach the back of the refrigerator case to grab some expired products when I heard her cart getting closer. The aisle was narrow, and I knew I was taking up some space, but I figured she could easily go around me or wait a second for me to finish. I was almost done with that section anyway. When I started to stand up and move my cart out of the way, I stepped backward to give myself some room. That's when I felt my foot land on something soft. I immediately realized I had stepped on her foot and spun around to apologize. I told her I was really sorry and that I hadn't seen her there. But before I could even finish speaking, her face turned bright red, and she started screaming at me. She yelled about how much her shoes cost and asked if I was kidding her. I tried to explain that it was completely an accident and that I was just trying to do my job, but she cut me off. She started ranting about how people like me never watch where we're going and how the store was going downhill because of employees like me. I was confused by what she meant, but I tried to stay professional. My supervisor had always told us that customer service was our top priority, even when customers were being unreasonable. I told her I understood she was upset, but reminded her that it really was just an accident. I asked if there was anything I could do to help. That seemed to make her even angrier. She stepped closer to me, and I could see that look in her eyes that I'd learned to recognize after 3 years of retail work. It was the look of someone who was used to getting their way no matter what. She told me I could help by doing my job properly and staying out of paying customers' way. She was practically spitting the words at me by this point. I explained that I was doing my job by restocking the dairy section, which was exactly what I was supposed to be doing at that time. She started yelling about how I shouldn't talk back to her and how she spent hundreds of dollars in the store every week. She said she deserved better treatment than what I was giving her. At this point, other customers were starting to stare. I could see our security guard, who usually stayed near the front of the store, starting to walk in our direction. I really wanted this whole situation to just go away. I told her again that I had apologized for stepping on her foot and that it was an accident. I said I was sorry it happened, but that I needed to get back to work now. I turned around to continue stocking the shelves, hoping she would just move on with her shopping. That was a mistake. Before I knew what was happening, I felt her hand grab a chunk of my hair from behind. The pain was instant and sharp. She yanked my head backward and then started pushing me toward the refrigerator case. She screamed that nobody walks away from her when she's talking to them. Her voice was getting higher and more shrill with each word. The whole thing happened so fast that I didn't have time to react. My head hit the metal edge of the refrigerator door with a loud bang. I felt something warm running down my forehead and realized I was bleeding. The security guard must have heard the commotion because he came running over just when she was pulling back to slam my head again. He shouted at her to let go of me right now, but instead of listening, she turned her attention to him. I stumbled backward, holding my hand to my forehead, and watched when she actually lunged at him with her hands out like claws. She yelled that it was all his fault and that people like us needed to train employees better. The security guard was a big guy who clearly knew what he was doing. When she came at him, he grabbed her wrist, spun her around, and had her on the floor in about 2 seconds. She was screaming the whole time about lawsuits and how she was going to have everyone fired. Other customers had started gathering around and someone must have called the police because I could hear sirens in the distance. The security guard kept her pinned down while she thrashed around and yelled about her rights. The paramedics showed up first and started checking the cut on my forehead. They told me it was bleeding pretty good, but wasn't deep enough to need stitches. They cleaned it up and put a bandage on it while the police were talking to witnesses. When the cops finally got the whole story from me, the security guard, and several customers who had seen everything, they arrested her for assault. She was still screaming about suing everyone when they put her in handcuffs. About 20 minutes later, the store manager pulled up the security footage. Apparently, the cameras had caught the whole thing, including her grabbing my hair and slamming my head into the refrigerator. The police said the video would make their case pretty straightforward. When they were loading her into the patrol car, she was still yelling about how this was all my fault and how she was going to own the store when her lawyer was done with us. But I noticed her tune changed pretty quickly when one of the officers mentioned that assault charges could mean jail time. My supervisor gave me the rest of the day off and told me to file a workers' compensation claim for the injury. The store manager also said they would be pressing charges and that I should expect to be contacted by their legal department about being a witness. 3 months later, I found out she had pled guilty to assault and had to pay a fine, do community service, and was banned from our store permanently. The workers' compensation covered my medical bills, and the store even gave me a small bonus for handling the situation professionally. I work as a lab technician at a hospital here in Milwaukee. Been there about 9 months now. The lab runs pretty smoothly most days, processing blood work, cultures, and various diagnostic tests that help doctors figure out what's wrong with their patients. My supervisor is this guy who's been there for maybe 3 years. He's the type of person who treats every minor issue like it's the end of the world. Spilled reagent becomes a catastrophe. Equipment making a slightly different noise than usual means emergency meeting. You get the picture? I started noticing his tendency to panic about 2 weeks ago when the state health department scheduled their routine inspection. Most of the other techs just shrugged it off. These inspections happen every couple years, and apparently they're usually pretty straightforward. Check some paperwork, observe a few procedures, make sure we're not doing anything obviously dangerous. But my supervisor went into full crisis mode. He started pulling out dusty binders from storage cabinets that looked like they hadn't been touched since I was in middle school. Suddenly, he's reading through every page of our official safety manual, highlighting things with a yellow marker like he's cramming for finals. The inspection itself went fine. The state guys came through, chatted with some staff, looked at our equipment, and left after about 3 hours. They didn't find any major issues, just some minor paperwork stuff that needed updating. Pretty standard stuff according to everyone else. But instead of relaxing afterward, my supervisor doubled down. He started implementing all these random protocols that were technically written down somewhere, but that nobody had actually followed in years. We're talking about procedures that were probably cutting edge safety measures back when dial up internet was still a thing. Last Friday morning, I walk into work and find this email waiting in my inbox. The subject line is in all caps saying, "Mandatory protocol compliance needs to start immediately." The whole message is written like he's declaring martial law in the lab. The email basically said, "We're doing everything by the book from now on. Zero shortcuts, zero exceptions." He doesn't care if procedures take longer. Anyone caught skipping steps gets written up immediately. No warnings, no second chances. Most of my coworkers just rolled their eyes and figured he'd calm down in a week or two. But I actually read through some of the protocols he was referencing. That's when I noticed something interesting about our equipment sterilization procedures. According to the official manual that he was now demanding we follow to the letter, every piece of equipment needs 8 full hours of UV light exposure between uses. Not 8 minutes, 8 hours. We have 6 main pieces of diagnostic equipment in our department. On a typical day, we run maybe 40 tests total across all of them. Some equipment gets used multiple times, some just once or twice. I did the math over the weekend. If we actually followed the 8-hour sterilization rule, we could run maybe 3 tests per day total for the entire department. Monday morning comes around and I decide to test just how serious my supervisor was about following every protocol exactly as written. I start up the UV sterilization cycle on the first machine I need to use. The timer shows 8 hours remaining. About an hour later, my supervisor walks by and sees me sitting at my desk instead of running samples. He asks why I'm not processing the morning batch since we have a backlog from Friday. I tell him I'm waiting for the sterilization cycle to complete. He looks confused and asks what sterilization cycle, telling me to just spray the equipment down with alcohol like always. I explain that, according to the safety manual he referenced in his email, equipment requires 8 hours of UV exposure between uses. I mentioned that I started the cycle when I got in, so it should be ready around 5 that afternoon. His expression changed from confused to annoyed to something approaching panic when I pulled out the manual and showed him the exact page. I flipped to his Friday email on my computer screen and read back his own words about doing everything by the book with zero shortcuts. He tries to backtrack, saying, "I know that's not what he meant," but I remind him that he said everything by the book with zero shortcuts, and this is what the book says. I could practically see the gears turning in his head when he realized the implications. If we had to wait 8 hours between uses for each machine, our entire department would grind to a halt. We'd have patients waiting days for basic blood work results. He spent the next 20 minutes frantically flipping through the manual, hoping to find some loophole or exception. When that didn't work, he had to call our department head. That conversation lasted another 30 minutes and involved a lot of nervous laughter and phrases about technical oversights and interpretive guidance. The department head had to get someone from the hospital's compliance office on a conference call. Turns out the 8-hour UV protocol was supposed to be updated back in 2015 when we upgraded to newer sterilization equipment. The new machines only needed 30 minutes under UV light, but somehow the manual never got revised. Nobody had noticed the discrepancy because nobody actually followed that particular protocol. Everyone just used the alcohol spray method, which was perfectly adequate for our equipment but wasn't technically what the official manual specified. By noon, we had compliance officers, department heads, and even someone from hospital administration trying to figure out how to handle the situation. The legal department got involved because they were worried about liability issues if we continued ignoring written protocols. They ended up shutting down all non-emergency testing for the entire day while they rushed through an emergency update to the safety manual. Patients who needed routine blood work had to wait until Tuesday. The emergency room had to send samples to another hospital across town for anything that wasn't immediately life-threatening. The revised protocol got approved and distributed by end of business Monday. 30 minutes of UV exposure, just like everyone had been assuming all along. My supervisor has barely spoken to me since then. When he does have to communicate something work-related, He usually sends an email or asks another tech to pass along the message. He definitely avoids walking by my workstation during sterilization cycles. The other techs think the whole thing is hilarious. One of my co-workers bought me coffee Tuesday morning and told me it was the best entertainment she'd had at work in months. A few people have started jokingly asking if they should check the manual before doing routine tasks like changing printer paper or restocking gloves. The department head pulled me aside Wednesday to make sure I wasn't deliberately trying to cause problems. I explained that I was just following the instructions exactly as written, which seemed to be what was requested. She seemed satisfied with that explanation and mentioned that the manual review had uncovered several other outdated protocols that needed updating. My supervisor still jumps at every little thing, but now he's much more careful about making blanket demands for protocol compliance. My husband is one of those rare white guys who actually made an effort to learn Spanish when we started dating seriously. He's not fluent, but he tries, and that means everything to me. When our son was born 2 years ago, we decided right away that we wanted him to grow up bilingual. My family back home speaks Spanish, and I refuse to let my child lose that connection to his heritage. Plus, being bilingual is such an advantage in today's world. My husband completely supports this, even though his own parents were a bit hesitant at first. They've come around now, especially since our son started saying the Spanish words for grandma and grandpa to them, which they think is adorable. I work part-time as a translator for a medical clinic, so I understand better than most people how important it is to speak multiple languages. I've seen families struggle because language barriers prevent them from getting proper health care. I've also seen how proud kids get when they can help their grandparents communicate with doctors or teachers. That's the kind of confidence I want my son to have. So there I was last Tuesday, doing my usual grocery run with my little one sitting in the cart. He loves these trips because I always let him help me pick out the fruit. It's become our little routine where I teach him the names of everything in both languages. He's at that age where he's like a sponge, soaking up every word. We rolled up to the produce section and I started our usual game. I picked up an apple and held it up for him to see. I asked him what it was in English and he proudly shouted out the word. Then I asked him to tell me the Spanish word and he said it perfectly. We moved on to a banana and he got both languages right again. When I showed him some strawberries, he clapped his little hands and gave me both the English and Spanish words without me even having to ask. That's when this woman, probably in her mid-40s, with that troublemaking haircut, whipped around from where she was examining some oranges. Her face was already twisted up in annoyance. She told me in a sharp voice that this was America and I should speak English. I was so caught off guard that I just stared at her for a second. I mean, who says that to a complete stranger? Especially when I'm just talking to my own child. I explained to her that I was bilingual and that my son was learning both languages. She shot back that she didn't want her kid growing up around people who couldn't speak properly because it was confusing for children. I looked around and didn't even see another kid with her, which made this whole thing even more ridiculous. I told her that sounded like her problem, not mine. I turned my cart around and headed toward the next aisle, hoping that would be the end of it. But of course it wasn't. I could hear her footsteps behind me, and sure enough, she followed me right into the cereal aisle. She kept going on about how I was being rude and that everyone speaks English here and I was in public. This woman was really not going to let this go. My son was starting to pick up on the tension and was looking back and forth between us with worried eyes. That's when I got really angry. Nobody gets to make my child uncomfortable like that. I looked her dead in the eyes and told her that she was in public too, so why didn't she mind her own business? I might have used some colorful language. She started to argue back, but that's when one of the store employees appeared at the end of the aisle. He was a young guy who must have heard the raised voices. He asked if everything was okay and if he could help us with anything. Karen suddenly got real quiet and started backing away. She mumbled something about everything being fine and that she needed to find pasta sauce. She hurried off toward the other end of the store, but I could hear her grumbling something about entitled people as she went. The irony was not lost on me. The employee asked if I was sure I was okay. I told him yes and thanked him, adding that some people just couldn't mind their own business. He said he'd heard a bit of what happened and told me he thought it was awesome that my little guy spoke 2 languages. He mentioned that his girlfriend was trying to teach him Portuguese and it was hard. I thanked him for his kind words. When he walked away, I looked down at my son, who was still looking a bit confused by the whole interaction. He asked me in his sweet little voice if Mama was okay. I told him yes in Spanish and explained that Mama was fine. I said some people just didn't understand how special he was. He asked what I meant by special, so I explained that he could talk to his grandmother in Spanish and to Daddy's parents in English, and that made him very smart. He smiled at that and went back to playing with the toy car he brought with him. We finished our shopping without any more incidents, but I kept thinking about that woman's attitude. The nerve of some people thinking they can police how other families communicate with each other. When I got home and told my husband what happened, he was furious. He wanted to go back to the store and find her, but I told him it wasn't worth it. People like that don't change their minds just because you argue with them. What really gets me is that she called me entitled. Lady, I'm the one raising a child who speaks 2 languages fluently. I'm the one making sure he stays connected to his culture while also being fully American. That's not rude or confusing. That's raising a global citizen who will have more opportunities than her narrow-minded kid ever will. The whole experience reminded me why I do this work as a translator and why I'm so passionate about my son being bilingual. In my job, I see firsthand how language can be a bridge or a barrier. I've helped families navigate medical emergencies, translate for kids at parent-teacher conferences, and assisted elderly patients who feel scared and alone when they can't communicate with their doctors. Just last month, I translated for a grandmother who was in the emergency room with her grandson. The little boy had fallen off his bike and broken his arm, and the grandmother was panicking because she couldn't explain to the doctors that he was allergic to certain pain medications. Without translation, that situation could have gone very badly. With it, the doctors were able to treat him safely and send him home with the right instructions. That's the kind of difference language skills make. That's why I'm proud to speak Spanish in public with my son. That's why I'll never let some ignorant person shame me into hiding parts of who we are. My son is going to grow up confident in both his languages and both sides of his heritage, and there is nothing entitled about that. If anything, that woman at the store was the entitled one. She felt entitled to tell strangers how to raise their children. She felt entitled to police other people's conversations. She felt entitled to make my son uncomfortable just because she didn't like hearing a language she didn't understand. But here's what she doesn't understand. America has always been a country of many languages. Before English speakers ever set foot here, there were hundreds of indigenous languages. Spanish has been spoken in parts of this country longer than English has. And today, being multilingual isn't just an advantage. It's becoming essential in our connected world. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.